Welcome to the first video about matrix logic puzzles. This is going to serve as an introduction to these puzzles and give you some basic skills to start solving them. So what is a logic puzzle? Well, it's a problem where you're going to match up items in different categories. For instance, you might need to match up someone's first name with their last name or with their favorite color. Now they become harder as you add in more people, more items, or really what makes them difficult is adding on more categories. So we're going to start off slow. We're going to start with 2 categories and eventually make our way up to 4. We're going to use a matrix, which is a type of table, to organize the information once we have either eliminated possibilities or we've made some connections. So we're going to use 2 different symbols here. We're going to shade in a box to mean that those 2 things are indeed connected. And we're going to use an X in the box to mean that they are not connected. We've eliminated that possibility. Okay, so let's talk about some basic logic. These are kind of common sense things, but it's really important that we understand them. Once we make a connection, that item cannot have other connections in that same category. So what does that mean? Let's say we had 2 categories we were matching up, a type of animal with a color. Let's say we knew that cat and blue had a connection. We're also going to call that some positive information. So when things are connected, we consider it positive. When they're not connected, we consider it negative. What else does that tell us once we've made this positive connection? Well, since we know that cat goes with blue, that means cat can't go with any of the other colors. So we can fill in X's in the cat's row. That also tells us that since blue goes with cat, blue can't go with any other animals, so we can also put X's in that column. So see how that piece of positive information actually leads us to fill in lots of different parts of the matrix. One more part of basic logic for these puzzles is to use process of elimination. So once all but one of the connections have been eliminated, as you see here for fish, we know that the remaining connection must be the correct one. So the only thing left for fish to be matched with is green. Now we'd also know that green can't go with any of the other animals, but I'm not going to bother marking those as X's right now. So let's start it off with a 2-category example. So this puzzle is called Favorite Sports. We have Ted, Ken, Allison, and Janie. They're 2 heterosexual couples. That's going to matter later on. And each of them has a favorite sport. The sports are running, swimming, biking, and golfing. From the following clues, we're going to match each person with their favorite sport. And we're given 4 clues here. So sometimes I like to read through all of the clues before I actually mark anything down. I'm going to do that here to also point out a few things that we haven't talked about yet. So for the first clue, we know that Ted hates golf. He agrees with Mark Twain that golf is nothing but a good walk spoiled. Sometimes the clues are very straightforward. Ted hates golf, right? Now notice it doesn't say that golf isn't Ted's favorite sport, but we know that that's what that's implying, right? So we do have to read a little bit between the lines here. We also have a clue here that's given us some information that really isn't serving a purpose. This idea that golf is nothing but a good walk spoiled. That's not serving a purpose here. We're just going to ignore that. Number 2, Ken can't run around the block and neither can his wife. Again, we have to read a little bit between the lines. If he can't run around the block, I'm going to guess that his favorite sport is not running. Now, neither can his wife. That seems to be the second part of the clue that we know might be important, but we don't necessarily know what to do with that right away. But we know that we could always come back to that. In the third clue, each woman's favorite sport is featured in a triathlon. So we have this word here that has some meaning to it, right? Triathlon. Sometimes with these puzzles, you're given information and you might have to do a little bit of research into what that means. So for a triathlon, you can look it up. It consists of 3 sports. First you swim, then you bike, and then you run. So golfing would not be included in that triathlon. Therefore, the women's favorite sports are not golfing. And for the 4th and final clue, Allison bought her husband a new bike for his birthday for use with his favorite sport. So it sounds like Allison's not the biker, right? Since she bought her husband the bike, but we don't know who the husband is. So again, we might have to come back to that clue once we know more. All right, so that's just a little bit of a sample of how we're going to read these clues. So it's not just a straightforward, like one little piece of information in these clues. Sometimes we have to go deeper into them. So let's give this a try. I've set up a matrix. These horizontal rows, notice, are the 4 names, and the columns are the 4 sports. So 2 category matrices are very, very simple, right? It's just this box. I have our clues written out here, and now we're going to use them to mark up the matrix. So back to the beginning. Ted hates golf. So we said that that means that golf is not Ted's favorite sport. So I'm going to put an X in that box. Here's the Mark Twain part. That's not really offering anything, and there's nothing else we can get out of this. I'm going to cross this clue off because I know there's nothing else that we can do with it. Number 2, Ken can't run around the block meant that Ken does not have running as a favorite sport. So we're going to cross that off. Now, neither can his wife. We said that we would have to come back to that clue. Since we don't know who his wife is, I'm going to underline that as like a signal that we do have to do something else with that. Okay, each woman's favorite sport is featured in the triathlon. So we said that golf is not in the triathlon, right? So that means that Allison is not picking golf as her favorite sport, and neither is Janie. Now, something else I haven't mentioned yet, and that's that our names also imply something, right? So Ted implies that this is a male. Ken, same thing. So sometimes it's good to write down male and female. Now that's not always the case, right? But with these puzzles, they traditionally follow what you would think is a male and a female name. Okay, so we've taken care of this clue, right? Each woman's favorite sport is featured in a triathlon. But notice what happened after we put those 2 X's in. Remember what one of our strategies, right, is to use process of elimination. So golf only has one possible connection right now, and that's Ken. So I'm going to shade in this box. And if Ken gets matched with golf, he can't get matched with anything else. So we can put X's in for swimming and biking. Moving on to that 4th clue. Allison bought her husband a new bike for his birthday for use with his favorite sport. So some husband, right, meaning a male, got a new bike for his birthday. So let's take a look at the males. Well, Ken is already the golfer. That leaves only one male that could have gotten the bike. So see how we used process of elimination there? So we know that Ted has gotten the bike, which means that Ted can't be running or swimming. I'm also going to make a connection here because it says Allison bought her husband the bike. So Allison must be married to Ted. And if Allison and Ted are married, that means that Ken and Janie must be married. So we've used this clue, right? We've gotten everything out of it. Now we can come back up here. Ken can't run around the block. Neither can his wife. Well, let's take a look. Who's Ken's wife? That would be Janie. So Janie is not our runner, which means that Allison must be the runner, right? By process of elimination. And if Allison's the runner, she's not going to be a swimmer or a biker, which means that Janie must be the swimmer, right? That's the only option left for swimmer. And we've made all the matches. And when we're done with these, we like to write a little summary of what we've matched up. So I'm going to write that over here. We know that Ted has a favorite sport of biking. Ken has a favorite sport of golf. Allison, her favorite sport is running. And Janie's favorite sport is swimming. And that was our first matrix logic puzzle. So let's move on. What happens when we have three categories we want to set up? Let's say we have names, colors, and states. When you connect these three things in all the ways they can be connected, right? So names go with colors, colors goes with states, names goes with states. See how names gets connected with both other things, with the two other things? Same with colors, same with states. See how we have three lines to make those connections? Those lines actually correspond to sub-matrices in our giant matrix. So watch what I'm going to do here. I'm going to set up colors and names. See how this is a yellow box here? Look at this. Names and colors. That was the yellow line. Next, I'm going to set up the states with the colors. That was our green line. Well, why did I do another box below here? Well, the one that we're missing is red, and notice how it uses names. So if name was already on here, we're going to go in the other direction here for that third match. All right, so there's our names and states. So these three connections, right, correspond to these three mini matrices here. What happens if we have four categories? How do we set that up? What if we had first name, last name, city, and job? Now that we have four things, there's a lot more we could do to connect them. So notice if I connect first name with the other three, right, that starts us off. But now I have to connect last name and city with job, leaving one more thing, which would be connecting last name and job. Count those up and you get 6 connections. So over here, we're going to have 6 little mini matrices. I like to think of it as starting in a horizontal row. So pick 2 things. So I picked first name and job. That's my red box. Keep it going horizontally here. What else does job have to get connected with? Well, it gets connected with last name and with city. So we have taken care of these 3 things here. Now let's go with first name. First name has to get connected with, we've already connected with job, so it has to get connected with last name and city. If I put last name right here, it's going to get matched up with itself in this little, in this middle column. So we don't want that to happen. So I'm going to make that one city. So see how that covers 2 of the things at the same time? So city and first name's the orange, and city and last name's the green. And that leaves the last name for the bottom here to get matched up with first name. So 4 categories get 6 of these boxes. And notice how I had to change the order of these 2 on the tops and the sides. Let's talk a little bit about strategies. So this one's called bouncing, and it might be a little hard to understand why it's called that until you do a lot of these puzzles. But basically, bouncing is about having connections with the same thing lead to even more connections, okay? If you have done any proofs in geometry, you already know that this is called the transitive property. So I like to think of it as positive information and positive information about the same thing, right? So let's say we knew that Jane was connected with red and Jane was connected with Texas. Well, that would mean that red must also be connected with Texas, right? Now, how would that look on a matrix? See how we have this column here, right here with Jane? See how in that column we have in the color category a connection with red, and in the state category we have a connection with Texas. So when you see multiple connections in a column or a row, that means you should go to one of the connections and look at the row or the column that it's in that you're not looking at. So I know that sounds kind of weird, but I think the visual will help you. It's like, see how these two columns and rows, like they overlap on this connection, right? This is like the idea of bouncing. It's very visual. Think of this matching up with this and then bouncing this way. It's like it hits this one and then bounces. It changes direction by 90 degrees. So this leads to the red and Texas getting matched up. See how we can see that visually? So notice it didn't just go in any of these boxes, right? This one started with Texas, right? Led us to red, and red led us back to Texas. So when you get really good at these, you don't even think of the common sense or the logic behind it. You just see it in the picture and you do it. But obviously from the clues, you can also just read it and understand that those would have to be connected. Now, you can also use this bouncing technique with positive and negative information combined. So here's an example where we have that Blue and South Dakota are connected, but we also know that Blue is not connected to Bob. So this leads to something else that's not connected, and that would be South Dakota and Bob, right? Because if these two are connected, but we know these two are not, then how could these two be connected? Visually, this looks very similar. So here's our matrix. This is the row I would be looking at. Here's the piece of positive information, right? Notice how it's in one of the categories. In this case, it's states. And see how in the same exact row, but in a different category, there's negative information, right? It's like a bounce. This and this is going to lead to this column here for Bob, right? And if we started out South Dakota, and we bounce off of Bob here, we're going to end up in South Dakota. So we're going to X that out. Those can't be together. Now you actually can do the same thing with Rick. Notice that, right? That could come from South Dakota to Rick. We know that this is not connected. Therefore, Rick and South Dakota are not connected. This strategy, I think, is maybe the most important strategy. So even if it doesn't make sense, try to work your head around it, whether it's visually with this picture or with the words, right? And realize that if you don't make those connections, a lot of times you're going to get stuck with the puzzle. Okay, another strategy is to rewrite the clues. So if you make a connection, you could always replace it with a connection that you know. So we call that substitution a lot of times, and it's very similar to bouncing. Sometimes it's exactly the same, sometimes it's not. So that's why I say it's similar. So here's an example. Let's say the clue was that the person whose favorite color is green went to a movie with Sarah, and the person whose favorite color is white. What if we also knew that the person from New Jersey's favorite color is green? We just heard something about the person whose favorite color is green. Well, from this clue, we know that that person's from New Jersey. So what if we replaced the favorite color is green with the person from New Jersey, and we reread that sentence? The person from New Jersey went to a movie with Sarah, and the person whose favorite color is white, right? That would give you a different perspective and perhaps new information that you didn't have marked down yet. All right, another strategy is separation. So when you are looking at the structure of a sentence, some of the words can give you clues to how many people it's talking about and how they are different. So here we go with that sentence again. The person whose favorite color is green went to a movie with Sarah, and the person whose favorite color is white. So how many people are we talking about? Well, let's start it off with the beginning here. We have the person whose favorite color is green. That is definitely a single person. They went to a movie with someone. So who did they go to the movie with? Sarah, right? Those are two different people. And then we have the word and. So the and is telling us that we have a third person here, and that person is the person whose favorite color is white. So just use that sentence structure to realize that those are three separate things, which means that Sarah can't be the green, Sarah can't be the white. And for our last strategy, kind of on the same idea as separation, sometimes we need to write down a little separate list to separate things out. So when there are like other weird clues, kind of like what we were doing with Allison and Ted and Ken, right? Like the wife-husband thing, might be helpful to make a little separate list. So here we have a clue: Fred and the pilot play golf together. The burger lover and the teacher hate golf, right? That's kind of an interesting clue, especially because this is going to be a clue from the example I do in my next video. And you'll realize that golf isn't one of the things that you're worried about. Like, you don't care about sports in this puzzle. So then you're really kind of thrown off your game. And then you realize, oh, they're separating this into groups for us. There must be a group that are golfers and a group that are non-golfers, right? So you can't be in both groups at the same time. So the golfers are Fred and the pilot. Oh, so Fred and the pilot are different people. And in the second group, the non-golfers are Burger and Teacher. They must be different. And I'm really looking at 4 different people now, right? So I could cross off all of the connections. Fred can't be the burger person. Fred can't be the teacher. Burger can't be the pilot. We'll come back to this idea in that next video. So I hope that this was helpful. It might be a little bit overwhelming, and I think you should give this a shot on one of the simpler puzzles, maybe the 2-category puzzles, and then maybe you'd be ready for the next video with a bigger example. Good luck with your next puzzle.